Hello? Testing, 1, 2, 3. Yeah, we are on. All right, so hopefully I check in with my colleagues here. You're listening me okay. We're gonna start this webinar on applying for consultative status with ECOSOC. I want to, first of all, thanks everybody. There was a lot of interest for this webinar, but more importantly, a lot of interest for NGOs to contribute, to apply for consultative status. We receive, and we have already here a lot of participants from all over the world, and it's really exciting, you know, the repercussion that this webinar is having. First of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Diego Rumiani. I'm transmitting here from the United Nations headquarters in New York. It's 11 a.m. here. I know you have different times, so this webinar will take place for an hour or so, maybe a little bit more, depending on the questions and depending on the interest we have on the other side. I work here as a program officer in the NGO Branch. That's the Department of Economic and Social Affairs at the UN. And the idea of this seminar is basically to go through the different aspects of the consultative status. So we are going to be dividing the presentation, which will take, I'll try not to do it longer than 30 minutes. And we'll cover, first of all, what is consultative status, what are the benefits on consultative status, and who is eligible to apply for it. The second part will go, and I'll try to show you also on the screen the application process, the process in which an NGO apply, which is what we are going to first discuss, and then how this application is reviewed by us here in this office, but also by the Committee on NGOs, which is the body that review the application and eventually through ECOSOC grant consultative status to organizations. And the final part of the presentation will talk about more on the components. It will be, if you want, the more technical part. We'll look at all the elements that need to be presented, the application form, some documentation, and what are the main, and what are the process. And I'm going to show you the system that you will be using to apply for consultative status and fill out the form, etc. So during the 30 minutes, I'll be just talking, and after those 30 minutes, I'll open to questions. So first of all, I want to encourage all NGOs that have questions that you can already write them in the chat box to the user NGO Branch. You will find a user in the list of participants. The name is NGO Branch. And I appreciate that you write all your questions to that user. It's one of my colleagues here who will be looking at these questions, sorting them out, and compiling them. And I will try to answer, many of these questions after the presentation. We will also be doing some interaction, but mostly the questions I want you to send it to the NGO Branch. And you can do it right now. You don't have to wait until the presentation. You can already start writing. If you have any questions, of course, some of them maybe will be answered as I speak. All right. The other thing I will ask you is if you can, during the presentation, keep your microphones down, because otherwise that will disturb other participants from listening to me. So that's very important that you make sure your mic is off all the time. All right. So let's begin with the presentation. The consultative status is one of the relationships that is most important for NGOs at the UN. This was established, relationship with the NGOs started more or less by the time the UN was created, but this was formalized in 1996 as a way of creating a specific and formal relationship between NGOs and the UN. There was a resolution called ECOSOC Resolution 1996-31 that you can refer to, which regulates all this relationship, and is basically the legal framework under which this is established. The consultative status is a relationship that is important not only because it allows NGOs to have access to the UN, but also it allows you to contribute to the UN, to really get engaged in intergovernmental processes. There are no other relationship that you can obtain as an NGO that you can actually be in deliberations at intergovernmental processes and contribute and be able to influence those processes through your contribution. So that's why it's a very valuable relationship, and that's why we have so many NGOs as part of this relationship. Right now we have above 5,000 NGOs in consultative status with ECOSOC. This relationship gives you the benefit to, of course, have access to UN premises in New York, Geneva, and Vienna, which are the offices in which ECOSOC is mostly functioning. And they give you, they give you access through bringing ground passes to these offices, but also the possibility to attend meetings that otherwise will not be open to ECOSOC, to NGOs. There are pretty much all the subsidiary bodies of ECOSOC, all the major commissions, like the Commission on the Status of Women, the Commission for Social Development, including also the High-Level Political Forum on Sustainable Development, which is a relatively new institution that also is open for NGOs in consultative status. Through consultative status, NGOs also have the possibility to participate in the Council, in the Human Rights Council, and other institutions that are not necessarily part of ECOSOC or not directly related to ECOSOC. This mechanism it's important because it not only gives you access to participate, but also to provide and submit written statements or speak at these deliberations, depending on the modalities of these meetings. And each meeting has their own rules, but ECOSOC Resolution 1996-31 gives you the right to deliver oral statement and submit written statements to these meetings, to ECOSOC subsidiary bodies, and to the ECOSOC substantive session, which is very valuable and very important for NGOs. This gives you direct participation. You will be part of the proceedings of these meetings. So that's why this is so important. In addition to the formal mechanisms for participation, which are the ones that I enumerated, there are a lot of informal mechanisms. There are mechanisms in which you can organize side events to most of these meetings. In New York or in Geneva or Vienna, you have opportunities to showcase your work, to show what you're doing. That's a way of contributing directly and sharing to ECOSOC what you're doing. There are other mechanisms in which you can network or exchange information with other NGOs, but also with UN officials or with member states representatives in the process of this meeting. So this process really opens a door to work in the development arena, in international community, and really interact with many actors and in many processes that are official processes of the UN. And definitely there is no process, there is no gateway for NGOs to really have this access to the UN work. So these are more or less the benefits. I will talk a little bit more about that later. The question I usually get is, well, if you're interested, how do you get in? Well, we have an application process, but also the important thing, there are some eligibility, and the main eligibility requirements are that NGOs that wish to apply, you have to be an NGO, a non-governmental organization, and you have to be in existence for 2 years at the moment you submit your application. That's a very important requirement. Of course, they're going to ask you for different documentation. We're going to go through it, but the most important thing is that you have to be in existence for 2 years. If you are not, then you'll have to wait until you become eligible. So everybody who is submitting applications, please bear that in mind. We have, from our survey that we did when registering participants, we know we have some people that are in the process of submitting applications, some people already submitted, and some people are considering submitting applications. The important thing is that you have in mind the eligibility, and all this information is also available in our website in terms of which NGOs are eligible to apply or not. So let's talk now about the application process. So the application process, it's a long process. Unfortunately, there is a lot of interest. Last year we received more than 800 applications for the duration of a year. This year, which we end up in June 1st, as you probably saw in the announcement, June 1st is the deadline for this cycle. We are getting probably a similar number of applications, so we are very busy with many applications and a lot of interest. But these applications that we receive are to be reviewed by the Committee on NGO during 2020. So let me explain you how this works. The committee, the NGO branch receive applications throughout the year. You can actually submit it after June 1st if you want. It really doesn't, it's not that we stop receiving applications. June 1st is important because it's the deadline. All applications received between from last year, June 2nd last year, to June 1st this year are scheduled for the 2020 review of the committee. That means that if you submit an application today, we'll try to look at it from today until during the rest of the year, and based on that review and based on the questions we may have on our end, we will decide whether we can submit this application already to the committee or not, or we'll have to wait a little bit more. These applications are first reviewed by us, and we're going to ask you questions of eligibility. We may ask you questions about documentation. We may ask you, different type of questions that are essentially technical. We are trying to see if you're eligible, and we want to make sure that all the elements are in your application. So we really want your application to be the best. We try that with the time we have to improve your application, to make sure that nothing is missing. When we have that ready, we submit it to the committee. The NGO branch submit it to the committee, and the committee will review your applications together with many others. Usually the committee review between 250 and 300 new applications per session. The committee meets in January and in May. Actually, we are having in a few days a session of the committee. And in those two instances of the year, they will look at your application and ask you also questions. If the organization gets, if the committee is satisfied with the answers to these questions, or maybe you don't even have questions, but they're satisfied with the application, then you are recommended for consultative status. Okay, that's basically the process. However, at that time, let's say you are recommended in January, you are not yet having consultative status. You just have a recommendation. And then in the meeting of ECOSOC, which is in June, you eventually, ECOSOC ratifies that decision, or actually makes a decision to officially grant consultative status. This whole story is, my point is that if you apply right now, the earliest you can get consultative status is in June or July, depending on the council meets twice, June for January, July for May. It will grant you consultative status at that time, assuming again that we don't have any problem in the NGO branch, the committee doesn't ask questions, or if there are questions, the questions are answered to their satisfaction. So assuming everything goes smooth, the earliest you can get is at that time. So when you apply, you have to have that in mind, because I'm sure you have a lot of ideas and a lot of, a whole schedule of activities that you will like, and I'm sure consultative status will play into it. So you have to have an idea of that you will not get consultative status until that. So you will not be able to access all these benefits that I mentioned before until that date. Of course, and unfortunately, the process could get delayed if the committee has further questions. So if the committee has some questions and they ask those questions and their answers are not to their satisfaction, eventually they will ask more questions. So your case could get deferred over multiple sessions. There are some applications that get deferred for several sessions, Although most applications will probably get answered in a year or two, depending on the level of questions that they have and their concerns from the delegations. The Committee on NGO is a committee that is an official subsidiary body of ECOSOC. It's composed of 19 member states on a rotational basis. Every 4 years, these 19 member states are re-elected, so some of the member states may change. You can see the member states, the list is on our website as well, and you can learn more about the committee itself on our website. And it's a standing body for, among other activities, looking at your applications and making the recommendations for consultative status. So I want you to understand the whole process, to have an idea of the timing, which is important. We encourage NGOs, even though you have until June 1st, to apply as soon as possible, not to leave it at the last minute, because at the last days, the activity of the website increase, and it could slow down a little bit, and you don't want to have any problem, or it could be even a problem from your side, that you don't want to leave it at the last minute. But also, it's important to apply early, because the website, the review that we do of application is done on a first come first served basis as well. So the earliest you apply will also benefit you on getting into earlier sessions. The difference between getting into January or May has to do with that, in the order in which we will be looking at your applications. So have all that in mind for your planning. The last part I want to comment on is the components of the application package. So the application is composed of, I would say, 4 parts, and this is basically what you have to submit. There is a form of 21 questions. We will see now a little bit the questions. I will go into the system pretty soon. And 3 required documents. These documents are a proof of existence issued by governmental authorities. This is how we certify the 2 years. The other thing is the constitution or statutes or bylaws that shows the decision-making process of the organization. We really want to look at the structure of the governance structure of the organization and how the organization makes decisions. And the last document is a financial statement, which should show at least an income statement and a balance sheet. Of course, the more complete information on finance is very good. Committee members over the years start asking more and more questions about financial information. So it's important that you really present a good application from that perspective. That financial statement should be the latest one you may have. So what I'm going to do right now, in order to, I'll continue talking, but I want you to see a little bit of the website and go a little bit more hands-on. So I'm going to go into our application system. So I will now share my browser. And I'm going to check here with my colleagues to make sure you are having a good view of the website. So what I went here is to the csonet.org, which hopefully you know how to get here because you register through this website. But remember, this is csonet.org. This is the official website of the NGO branch. And from here, we're going to go to login for ICSO database. And this is the website in which many of you already submitted applications. And I'm going to here log in as an NGO that I created, a test NGO. So you can see how it looks. So here you will have to create your profile, your information. You will get a username and password. And again, many of you already went through that already. And all this is instructed in the application in our website as well. I'm just showing you so you see this, how it works live on our website. So now I'm logging in. And as you can see here, it says welcome to the homepage of your organization, and you can see that I have an application that is incomplete. I don't know if you see my mouse where I'm moving it. And I'm going to be here looking at the application. So I'm going to see the, okay. So this is the application. So the application, of course, the text here, please don't pay attention. It's just a random text just to fill out the form. And here you can see that we have all the questions. And if you can see the tabs, the application form, which is composed of 21 questions, as I said, is divided in 3 sections. I'm not going to go question by question because we really don't have the time for that. I can answer if we have time, some questions, some particular questions if you have. But I will comment a little bit some parts of the application that you may want to pay special attention. So the question is, the application form is divided in 3 parts. The first part is mostly the substantive part of the NGO. So it talks about how the organization perform its activities, what are the objectives, what are the projects they have, and most important, I want to stress on that, is question 5A, how the organization is planning to contribute to ECOSOC. I always advise NGOs on this question to pay special attention, because here you want to show that in this relationship is not only the NGO that is having access to meetings and the possibility of obtaining information, but also what the NGO is bringing to the table, what the NGO is planning to contribute to ECOSOC as soon as they have consultative status. And here you want to show, of course, all what your ideas and all the activities that you want to do, or actions you want to take, but also you want to show that you know already what you can do at ECOSOC. Basically, I tend to say to NGOs that you did your homework on ECOSOC and that you know already which conferences, which commissions, what kind of activities like submitting statements or organizing events, or you know, the different type of contribution you can do at the UN. Are you choosing to contribute if you get consultative status? So it's pretty much like a cover letter of the organization. And question 5 is very, very important. This will be considered by the committee members, and they want to see exactly what your contribution will be. Remember, consultative status, it's a process that is bidirectional. So the UN also wants to get civil society to provide input to the intergovernmental process. So that's why we need this interaction. Of course, they also ask questions about if you have participating in UN conferences and sort of things like that. The second part, registration and structure, it's more, if you want, operational. It talks about when the organization was registered, what is the coverage of the organization, the decision-making process here as well, the members of the organization, both the executive members, or if it's a membership-based organization, how many members they have or beneficiaries. If the organization have relationship with other entities, that's also very important. Sometimes the work you're doing is not done directly by you, but is done through partners. So this type of relationships is very important. That is very well reflected here. And then the relationship with the government. Another stop here is important. Remember that you are an NGO, you are a non-governmental organization. So it's important that you maintain your independence from the government. And of course, that doesn't mean that you cannot work with the government, or that you cannot even receive funds from the government. That's totally fine, and many NGOs do that. The important thing is that you make very clear in the application the way in which these contributions or this relationship does not alter your independent decision-making process. So independence is the key word for your application if you happen to have any interaction with government, or even with private sector companies, or with other entity that is not your own. You know, we want to see that your actions are really controlled by your board of directors and not with other entities, particular or especially governments, because that's basically what you have to try to that's why you are an NGO. The last part is the income and expenditure. And here we want information about your financial statement, and this is independent of the financial statement document you will be uploading, but here you will be filling out this specific form to explain the source of income of your organization. So how your income is distributed into different type of sources, if it's the money is coming from membership, if it's coming from governmental sources, if it's coming from other NGOs, if it's coming from services that the NGO may be providing, you know, whatever the sources are should be listed here, and the sources of expenditure, which is we usually divide it into administration and projects. Very important here that you try to organize your expenditures within the projects you do. The committee doesn't really want to see that all your all your income is going into administrative expenses. They want that is going into projects. So it's very important that when you prepare this presentation, you really try to assign these amounts into projects that you already have. Because these activities are ultimately, all the income you receive ultimately is conducive to having projects or having activities that contribute to the goal of the organization. So it's really important that you really present this in this way. Finally, in the form, you have the document section. Before saying that, I want to also state that more and more, I mean, most organizations have websites, and more delegations are also looking at the websites of the organization. So it's very important that you are consistent, the information you put in the application form, with the websites. Inconsistencies between the two could create questions, and as you have seen in the process, you want to have the least questions possible, because questions means delaying your application. So whatever you present in the website, which will be also available for the committee members to see, you want that the information in the application is consistent with it. So just bear in mind that you have that into consideration when filling out this form. The last part I want to show is the documents section. And the document section, and here I have multiple documents here, but basically here you have a lot of documents that you can upload, but we need at least 3 documents: the certificate, the constitution, and the financial statement. All these documents are submitted online. In the case of the constitution and the financial statement, and actually in the case of the 3 documents, we need translation into the 2 working languages of the UN, which is English or French, which is also the languages that you're allowed to submit this application. This application can be filled out in only these 2 languages. Unfortunately, we cannot have other languages for capacity reasons. We only accept English and French, and the documents also have to be, if they are not originally in English or French, needs to be translated into English and French. Into English or French, either or. If you choose, in the case of the proof of existence, the certificate of registration, or any document that is accepted, you need to have the original document as well. So let's say you're an organization from Brazil and the document is in Portuguese. So we need that Portuguese document and a translation into either English or French. Okay, so to really clarify this, all documents, 3 documents are required. The constitution and financial statement could be directly in English or French. The certificate of registration needs to be in English or French, but we need the original document to verify that this document was issued by governmental authorities. Okay, so this is the requirement on this documentation. And this is basically the place where you will have to upload these documents. So I'm saying at least 3 because with the translation eventually could be more than 3 documents. Okay, so, but the idea is that there are 3 required documents for this application. All right, so with this I conclude showing you the application process. The last thing I want to show you and also make you, remind you is that, hold on, let me, I'm trying to go back here. So it's very important that when you are in the application, you go to the last page that is called summary. I want to show you that. And you can create the document, work with it. You know, you don't need our permission or anything. You can start filling out all the information partially, go back later, etc. And when you are ready, you have to go to the summary tab, which I didn't comment. So there are 3 sections of the application form, and this tab, which contains a lot of information that was already provided before. Make sure you fill out the number of members, which is this information here, but this the system will let you know, and submit the document. So when I go to update, there is this button, submit. Sometimes we have problems of people believing that they submit the document, they didn't. So make sure you don't forget this last step. With this step, you submitted the document. You will get a confirmation notification in the screen and an email telling you that the document has been, the application has been submitted. And after that, your job is done. You know, you just have to wait for us to receive the application and eventually review it and initiate the whole process. Throughout the, let me go back to our website. Throughout the process, you can always contact us, and I really encourage you to do it. In our website, and back to our NGO Branch website, you can come here and you can send us a question with your username and password, and just make sure you select the category application for consultative status, and you can write us questions about anything you want related to applications, your application. So if you have questions while filling out the application, you can write here. If you have questions of what is the current status of your application, although you can follow it online, but if you have any specific issue about that, you can also write here. When it's going to the committee and there are issues with the committee as well, you can write us questions as well. Of course, during the last days of May, we'll try to respond to your questions right away, but it might be difficult to do it as fast as we can do it, for instance, right now or later, because of the large number of applications and because most of the applications are submitted in the last week. That's why we also encourage, for our own sake, to do it before, because we can also provide you a better support if we work that way. All right, so with this, I conclude my part on this. I try again to cover most of the process. I'm gonna go back to the camera. So right now we try to see again all the process. We try to see what is consultative status. We try to cover and try to give you some hand-on of what will be your experience filling out the form, but also to know what will happen after and give you some idea about the timing. So for now, what I'm going to do is, I understand some of you already wrote several questions, so I'm going to try to address some of the questions, and I'm also going to give you the floor for some others, and try to see if we can cover some more specific issues or some issues or something that I said that was not understood. So I want to confirm with my colleagues that the camera is on. Yeah. On? Yeah. Okay, that there's no technical problem. I want to continue to speak to an audience. Just 1 second. All right. So I have here the questions in front of me. So I'll try to cover some of them. So one important thing is this event will be also shared to all participants, even the ones who couldn't miss it, that were missing it or couldn't make it for the webinar. We will be uploading as soon as possible a YouTube video that will be accessible on our website, where you can see this whole recording. So that's one of the questions I received. Regarding the decisions, some people are asking about specific events that they would like to participate, and they're trying to see if the decision could be made before that. Unfortunately, what I said, June and July 2020 will be the earliest you can get. So unfortunately, the commissions, someone here asked specifically about the Commission on the Status of Women, which is normally in March every year, will not, for next year, for 2020, they will not be able to register under the name of the NGO because that happens after. So unfortunately, there is a delay there. Some questions about eligibility. They're asking about if there is any restrictions about countries. There is no restrictions on countries. All NGOs from all over the world are welcome to apply. There is no fee also to apply, the questions that I usually get. So this is a process that we really try to make it accessible to everybody. So all people that want to fill out an application, they can do it. They can do it from any country, and they can do it at no cost. Even the financial statement, for instance, we don't require financial statement to be audited, or we don't require processes that require extra money to be extra cost to be done. We try to minimize that as much as possible. Sorry, I someone is telling me here that there was no audio on the last thing I said. Yeah, so what I was saying is on the fee, on the access to this process, there are no there is no cost. Basically, we don't put any extra cost. People from all countries can apply, and we try to minimize as much as possible the additional costs you may incur. Like we don't need financial statements that are audited, or we don't need a special registration. Nor with what you already have, you should be able to enter online and apply. So that's something important. The same thing, I have a question here about translations. We don't need translations that are translated by notary publics or any official translation. You can do the translation. If delegations have any problem on trying to find out the authenticity of the translation, or if the translation was correctly done, they have mechanisms to solicit to the specific countries to find out if the documentation is legit or if it's properly translated. So that's something that NGOs also should not need to incur. Of course, you can do it if you want. I'm not saying that all these things you cannot do it. It's just that you're not required to do it. Let me see one more before we go to the floor. One more. Yeah, that's another important question. When you put programmatic expenditures or project expenditures, which I said, it's very important that you focus on those when doing the application. It's very important to provide a breakdown. They're asking me here if it's good to provide a breakdown in program areas. Yes, it's very important. The delegations wants to see not only that the money is going to your project, but also to see to which project and in which quantities. In general, as a general rule, you want to provide as much details as possible in the whole application, but particularly in the financial part, because it's important to know how the money that you're receiving is going to the objectives of your organization, how the money is going into what you do as an NGO. So that's also very important. So I will now switch to try to get some question live. We have a lot of people here. And for that, I will ask you there is a functionality called raise your hand. It's a little hand with a white background, doing like this. And so anybody who has a question can raise it. Of course, I will not be able to address all of them, but I'll try to pick randomly so we have some interaction. So please, you can go ahead now, and I will look. Okay, so I'm gonna go to Mary Luke, and they will let me know when you actually can speak. Okay, now you can speak. Hold on, sorry, there was an audio problem. Yes, Mary Luke, and I appreciate everybody that they quickly introduce yourself just with your name, which in your case I already said it, and which NGO, and which is the status of your application.
Thank you. I'm with Power New York, and we have not applied yet. We're an NGO focused on economic empowerment. The question goes back to your original presentation about the Committee on NGOs. You said they meet twice, once in May and once in January. So I'm wondering, this group of applications due by June 1st, when will they go to the committee, and then obviously to ECOSOC?
Okay, very good. Thank you for your question, and that's very important. So the committee is considered as one session split in two. That's the best way to see it. Actually, it used to be like that many years ago. Now we have a session which we call the regular session in January and the resume session in May. All the applications that were submitted this year, which is concluding in June 1st, are supposed to be submitted to this entire committee. Because we cannot submit all to one session, we have to split it. We go in on a first-come, first-served basis. So the applications, the NGOs that are already applying, like we already got many applications that are already submitted, will probably go in the first session. Okay, will go into January, and the rest will go into May. The decision between one or the other is simply timing. It's simply when the application was submitted. The other variable that it can be taken into consideration is the interactions we have with the NGOs. Some cases, because we may be missing documentation or we have specific questions, each NGO is different, we might delay that. So maybe an NGO that submitted very early, but we have to work a lot with their application, eventually will not make it in January, will make it in May. Can we guarantee when? No. We cannot say. What we can say is that mostly NGOs that will be submitted, if you want, from 15 May onwards, most likely will be based on experience and based on previous years, will be mostly submitted in May. Now, the difference between January and May, although it's a difference in treatment, it's not really a big difference in getting status because there is 1 month apart. Applications in January will eventually get status, again, assuming that there's no questions and it goes smoothly, in June. Application in May will go into July. So we are really talking at the end of the day of 1 month of difference between one and the other. Of course, it's better if you do it in January, because if there are problems in January, your application could get deferred into May. So you have another chance of interacting with the committee. So it's always better to apply early and to get earlier. But, and you have some indication of how you can get in January and May, but there is no guarantee. Of course, if you apply like right after the beginning of a cycle, almost sure you're going into January. But more than that, it's hard to say where the break is. Is that answering your question?
considered when will it get considered by the commission?
Well, again, it's not.
Because we're not talking about January anymore. We're talking about right now, and your deadline is June 1st for 2020.
Right. So if you apply right now, I mean, there could be a possibility of making it in January if you submit it right now, but most likely it will be May. That will be the answer that I can give you, because it's we are almost at the end of the cycle. The thing is, a lot of applications apply at the very end of the process.
Right.
Yeah, so that's why you still have a chance of making it in January.
Okay.
You know, you could argue, well, we are in May already, it should be all in May, but not really. because most of the applicants apply on the last week or 2 weeks. And this is, I'm going by experience. I mean, this is what normally happens, and that we expect and we are prepared to work with. So if you want to make it in January, my advice is you can do it, but do it now. Apply it right now.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. I'm going to take another person. Let me see. I'm going to take Maria Leonora Torres.
Hi.
Yes, now you can
Yes.
talk.
Yes, I was asking, do we have a chance to get a personal consultation with you? And I'd like to present my case because I've been having issues with my application for 4 years now. It's really, and I pulled out my application actually, and I want to discuss it personally with you. I've also sent letters to your office before. It's just my questions have not answered.
Okay. First of all, regarding the personal consultation, as you can see, we have 800 applications, so that's always difficult. That's why we have this system of the messages that we respond. I mean, we can eventually explore separately why. First, if you send it to the messaging system that we have, and we can explore why these questions were not answered. Regarding personal consultations, we try to minimize them because it's a lot of people, but we eventually do that if it's possible. What I recommend you in those cases, if we cannot really resolve your issue online and through the messaging system, you can definitely request that, and we will see if we have the time and to receive you and try to see your cases. In general, the preferred mechanisms is the messaging system, which is what I showed you before in the contact us section. But there you can actually write whatever you want. Is that clear?
Yeah, well, for now it is acceptable because there's nothing we can do. However, I'm going to New York, and I would like to take that opportunity to present my case. It's a special case. It's not ordinary case.
Okay.
Like not the normal questions that you have on the book or on the website.
I
It's
see.
something to do political, and I don't know why it was a problem before. So if possible, I'd like to come to the office and consult with you.
Sure, we can arrange that. What I recommend you to do is to send this message. Remember, contact us on our website. Make sure you select the category application for consultative status. And what I recommend is first that you try to describe as much as you can the situation in our messaging system to see if we can at least give you some information on in writing, and eventually, yes, we can arrange some visit to see your case in particular.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, let me see if we have some other questions written here. Okay, someone is asking exactly what is the document constitution, charter or bylaws. That's how it appears on our website. So the constitution, I mean, all organizations should have something, because it's usually required by the government authorities, that reflects how the organization operates internally. And mostly what we care about this document is the decision-making process, so how the different organs of the organization make decisions, and the structure of these organs. So if there is a board of director, if there is a general assembly, if there is an executive board, if, you know, whatever the organization decided to structure itself, needs to be described in this document, and also how they make those decisions of the direction of the organization. You know, if they vote, if they meet regularly, whatever mechanisms they have. Again, this is a document that you all should have because it's required. And if it's not, some NGOs have it informally or could elaborate informally describing these elements. The important thing also is that we have amendments to this document. So if this document was modified over time, committee members would like to see these modifications as well, if you have those amendments, if you really had amendments. So that's about the Constitution, which is an important document. The other, so I have a question here, is after receiving a status, is it valid for only a few years? Is there a need for renewal? Well, there is no renewal, but every 4 years, NGOs and consultative status had to submit something called quadrennial reports. You know, a report to be submitted every 4 years, in which they have to describe the organization activities during those 4 years. I'm not going to go into detail of this because this webinar is mostly oriented of NGOs that are not having a status yet, and it's not something you will need to worry for the next 4 years, or actually more. But this document is very important, and it's a way in which the committee is monitoring the activity of the organization. And if the organization does not present this document, then eventually they can get first suspended and eventually withdrawn of their consultative status. So there is not a renewal process, that you don't have to apply to be renewed, but if you don't present this quadrennial report, yes, you can lose status. First through a suspension of a year, and then eventually definitely. So that's something to keep in mind for the future, you know, after obtaining status. I'll take one more and I'll go if there is another hand raised. Let me see. I'm trying to find some general question that could be also beneficial to most of our audience. They ask if they need to attach all financial statement or only the most recent. Really, you need to attach the most recent, but it's good to have not only the most recent, but to have others as well. To have maybe 2 or 3. It's good to see the progress of the finance of the organization, but the requirement is only the most recent one. The most recent financial statement that you have, and it has to be translated into English or French. The important thing here I have, if in the case of financial statement, if you don't have enough funds or like you don't really have a lot of information about finance, it's very important that you try to get this information, even if the money was coming from your own pockets or from other ways that maybe are not usually recorded in a financial statement, that you document that information. One of the worst thing that could happen in NGO in the committee is that they don't have a way to justify how they achieve their objectives if they don't have financial flows. you know, and even if that money is coming through informal, or is not really coming in cash, it's coming in goods, or is coming in different format, or is coming out of the pocket of the owners of the NGO, this is very important that you describe that and that you try to reflect and you try to quantify it in the financial presentation. Otherwise, the committee may ask you a question on that. So that's always something that I try to stress to NGOs who maybe don't present a financial statement or present a financial statement that has almost no information. I'll go to the floor now again, and we have more hands I can see. Let me see. Okay, I'm not seeing hands now. I saw it before. Okay, now I see it. Okay, I'll give the floor to Bojana, Bojana Berik Stojcic. You have the floor, Bojana. Well, maybe she's not there. You know. All right, I'll move to someone else. What about Christopher Fox? Yes, you have the floor. Christopher Fox.
Oh, hold on.
Oh, hold on.
Yeah.
Now. Oh, it's muting.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, now I can hear you.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, this is Christopher Fox, and I'm the CEO of the International Association for Dental Research. Considering an application, have not started one as of yet.
Okay.
We are also already in official relations with the WHO as a NGO in official relations. Is there any benefit or expedited process if your NGO is already some sort of relationship with another United Nations agency like the WHO?
Okay. Thank you for the question, and it's good question, because there is a lot of NGOs that are already in existing relationships with other UN entities. So the answer in terms of expedite process, no. All NGOs have the same, have to go through the same process for consultative status, independent of any type of existing relationship. However, of course, this is something that you will really like to stress and explain in your application about your activity that you are already doing with WHO, and there are many questions that will allow you to answer that, and to also clarify the relationship, if there is any funding or if there is any activity that you did in partnership, to really describe that, because this allows you to show that to the committee that you are already involved in UN activities, you are already used to at least part of these activities, and therefore it's something that is going to be relevant for you, and it's going to be relevant for the committee to see, you know. So I'll really stress that you include that in the application, that you disclose all that, because I think that will be in your benefit. However, there is nothing, there is in no way this will at least formally will not expedite your application.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll take another person. Let me see. Okay, I have Milika Milosev. Milika with M. Milika?
Hello.
Hello, I can hear you now.
Hello, everyone. I'm Milica Milosev, and I'm representing Team 54 Project International. I'm currently in Serbia, but the organization is registered in the US.
Okay.
So, I would love to know, because we are founded in 2017, but we are legal since 2015. Does it have some kind of rule for the application, or how it works? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Another important question. We have a lot of NGO register recently that usually apply, and we have to clarify that. Unfortunately, the requirement of the 2 years is on the basis of the proof of existence you provide. Many organizations have been, because in many countries you are actually able to operate without registration, and then the registration gives you maybe some tax benefits, or or different type of benefits that many NGOs decide not to do it at the beginning. But unfortunately, it is a practice of the committee. It is part of the requirement that NGOs provide this proof of existence, and that the 2 years are calculated based on this proof of existence. Sometimes the proof of existence cannot be provided, and then there are other type of proof of existence issued by governmental authority that you can provide. In the case of the U.S., particularly, the tax registration sometimes is used as a proof of existence if that has maybe the 2 years that you require. In other countries, there are multiple ways in which you can register. We don't discriminate among the different type of registrations as long as it is issued by a governmental authority. So I don't know in your case if you have other type of registration, but if the only one you have is from 2018, unfortunately, you will not be considered eligible, and you'll have to wait. But I advise NGOs to see if there are other ways or other proofs that you may secure. In some countries, for instance, members of the government issue documentation certifying, like in your case, you've been working since 2016, and if we have that, and the government is acknowledging and proving that you have been working for more than 2 years, we accept that. The only thing is we rely on government documentation only. So if we don't have that, then it's not going to be possible. Thank you. Let me see if I have another written question, and we should be wrapping up now. They ask if finance play a vital role. Thank you, because this allows me to stress that yes, it plays a fundamental role. The finance, not finance in the sense of how much funds you have, but that you really disclose the information, the financial information in detail. So member states can really evaluate your organization, not only of what you're doing, but also how you're financing your activities. This became over the years a very, very important area, and if you look at the total number of questions that NGOs receive, a big amount is about finance. So I really encourage NGO to spend time on it. If you're not a finance expert, try to get one, or try to get someone who could help you on that, because if your finance is not clear, and again, it's not about quantity. You can do fantastic work with little money, but it has to be clear. If you have a big amount that is not explained how it's distributed, that will definitely raise a question. So you want to really work on that. Let me see what else we have here. About coverage. Here they say, my organization has headquarters in 2 states. Could it be considered sub-regional? Well, the consideration of what is national, regional, and international is sometimes changing. So my advice here is that you really describe in detail your coverage. So if you have 2 offices, you put these 2 offices, and you say, how do you consider yourself? Which doesn't mean that some other one will consider differently. But if you disclose this coverage and you describe it, then there will be clarity on the other side, independently of what is the right category. The same with organizations that maybe are located in one place, but their services are done in different places. Then you can describe that. Then someone could say, well, you're national because your office is in one place, or international because you're serving many countries. That distinction is not that important. What is more important is that you describe exactly how the work is being done. And if you do work in the field in different countries, that you describe how that work is being carried out, how you really operate, and if you operate with partners in the field or you operate directly with your own personnel or with offices. The important thing here again is the details that to be given. Let me see if we have something else. I'm trying to really cover as much as we have. We don't have much more time. I'll give the floor. Let me see. I'll switch to the floor again for the last consultation. Let me see. I have here Salah Saleh with S. Hold on one second. We are okay. Now you have the floor. Salah?
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you now.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Nice. Thank you very much. Thank you for the information that you are giving to us. I'm representing the organization NGO, which is established in Iraq several years ago, and it has a daughter organization in Sweden. I'm talking from Sweden now.
Okay. Sorry, we lost your audio.
Can you hear me now?
Now we can hear you. Yes.
Okay, I'm saying that I'm representing organization 10 which is established in Iraq several years ago, and it has a daughter organization in Sweden.
Mm-hmm.
I am the executive director of the daughter organization in Sweden.
Okay.
The question is, if we obtain the status of consultative status, does that the status is going to be go to the both organization, the mother organization in Iraq and the daughter organization in Sweden?
Okay, very good question and very clear. Yes, the answer is the following. When you apply, you're applying on behalf of one entity, which has a registration in the country and with different activities. That entity has a name, and that's the name. That entity is under that name is the one that is going to be given consultative status. That means that every participation that the NGO will have from that moment on will be done under that particular name. That doesn't mean that if you, for instance, members of, let's say you apply on behalf of the Swedish entity, that doesn't mean that maybe a member from Iran can attend the UN and speak or actually take several actions at the UN. The thing is, this person will be representing the NGO officially, their NGO that got status, which in the example I just made will be the Swedish chapter of the NGO. Of course, the NGO could eventually submit another application under the other one, but that will be considered a separate application and will be another organization. So you have to decide basically which entity you will like your statements, your participation to be representing your participation at the UN. Is that clear?
Yeah, it's clear, but I do have another question.
Sure.
If there's time for that.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Thank you. The question is about the financial statement. Our organization, all members that working for the organization, they are working voluntarily. So we don't have salary that paying to the people who was volunteer for the organization, as well as we
Mm-hmm.
So what type of financial statement that we need to present in order to go on with the process, with the application process?
Okay, that's thank you for that question. So as I mentioned before, in this type of financial statements are of course a little bit more difficult because there is not so much quantity to reflect. However, you have to try to reflect the information of the if the members are doing activity. I mean, the organization is doing activities. These activities are usually incurring in costs, and this cost is coming from some source. Maybe the money that the members are contributing voluntarily, or maybe the time, or maybe donations that you are doing yourself to the organization because you say you don't receive funds from any other organization, or any other type of mechanisms should be, to the best of your abilities, quantified, so you can justify the activities you are doing. Because if you are saying that you are maybe organizing some events, or you're whatever your organization does, and that normally has costs, and the committee wants to see how these costs are fulfilled, even if those costs are not really coming from contributions from other parties. Maybe these are coming from yourself. So you have to try to reflect, even if we are not talking about a lot of money, in a financial statement that includes at least an income statement and a balance sheet. This is what you want to submit. We cannot accept applications without that documentation because the committee requires this documentation. But you can prepare this documentation with the information you have. And of course, you have to find out the best way to quantify this. Otherwise, the committee will say, if you don't have funds or you don't have a way to justify these sources, then how you achieve your objectives, how you carry out your activities with zero money. So that's the effort, if you want, that you have to do in fulfilling this requirement and displaying this information. Is that clear?
Yes, it's clear. Thank you very much.
Very good. Thank you very much. So with this, I will. We are running really out of time. We ran out of time already. So I would like to conclude this webinar. I really thank you a lot for the great questions actually we received in writing and the interaction we just had with a few of you, but also for the interest. We receive a lot of registration and we have a lot of people here interested, and also the interest in applying. I know it is a process that is not easy. I mean, you have to put a lot of yourself in filling out this form, in getting the documentation, and in uploading, and also you have to wait because, as I mentioned, it's a slow process. But what I tried to convey you at the beginning of this presentation is that it's really worth it. That really at the end of this process, you really have the ability to interact with most of the UN mechanisms, again here in New York, but also in Geneva and Vienna, where different bodies of ECOSOC are present, and really work side by side, not only with UN people, but also with member states, with other NGOs. So it really gives you a good venue for developing your NGO, for achieving your objectives, and for growing. So I hope and I wish you all the best in your application, and in for the ones you already submitted for the review that you will have. And again, I want to remind you, I know I said it many times, I'll say it more times, to go to our contact us if you have any question. Unfortunately, I was not able to answer everything. You can write to us to the messaging system. Contact us on the csonet.org, and remember, put a category application for consultative status. You can write whatever you want that is related to the applications, and we will try to respond as fast as possible So also you don't lose time in submitting the application before the deadline. So with that, I want to thank you again. I want to thank my colleagues here who were making sure your microphones were mute and you were able to listen. There were some issues here and there. I hope you were not so much affected by them. And all the best in your life, and all the best for today and the weekend. Thank you very much.